How many people are on?
We've got Miss Andrea Cozy, Mr. Jay Goday, Mr. Eugene Collins, Ms. Marquita Cottenham, Mr. Quentin Anthony, and Devontae Lewis.
Okay, I'm letting a couple more people in because they're saying that it wasn't working. It wasn't letting them in because it wasn't letting me in either. So
yeah, we had an issue with the password, and I'm very sorry about that. I'm not sure what was going on there.
Okay, I'm forwarding some information to one more person. Well, I know we're kind of late, so if you want to, we can go ahead and start.
Okay, I just introduced myself and Preserve Louisiana and talked about our role in historic preservation and community revitalization and our partnership with you. So if you want to go ahead and do your intro, they've heard from me.
Okay.
Hi, Farley.
Hi, my name is Brittany Zeno. I'm the Executive Director of the Old South Baton Rouge Economic Redevelopment Group. And we've been established for about 3 years. We partner with another association that's been longstanding in the Old South community, which is the South Baton Rouge Civic Association, which is headed by Ms. Christine, who's here with me today. Our goal and our focus is we tend to focus on the historic preservation in the Old South community, and also we focus on the need of the members in the community and just try to make sure that they are in contact and they have the tools that they need to get things accomplished within the community of Old South Baton Rouge.
Okay, so Brittany, I think you're up with the first question. Do you want to go ahead and launch into our questions? Or actually, no, we had talked about you each doing a minute introduction around economic redevelopment and historic preservation. I'm sorry about that. So if you each want to take a minute to talk about that, we have a handy dandy timekeeper and our friend Greg. And how about we go ahead and start with Mr. Anderson.
Well, thank you guys for having me. This is probably one of the more sort of geographically satisfying forums because of my history in this part of the district. I went to McKinley High School with my law degree right down the street from McKinley at LSU, and so this particular area of Baton Rouge is really near and dear to my heart. While like many of you watching and most people in 2020, I wear a bunch of professional hats. The hat that I'm most proud of is that I'm the executive chairman of the Justice Alliance, which has given me the ability for the last couple of years to organize a statewide social justice conference called the My Louisiana Equality and Equity Summit. I'm running for a couple of different but very specific reasons. The first is obvious and should be the motivation, I think, for anybody who's running. I want to see my city grow, improve, change, and progress. I'm running on a justice platform because I think embedding equity in every policy we pursue as a city parish is paramount to achieving those goals, including preserving.
We're actually out. We have 1 minute, Quentin. We've got to go through this, but thank you so much for that. I'm trying to figure out if Ms. Coleman has had a chance to join us. Do we see Ms. Coleman on? I do not. So with that being said, we'll move on to Mr. Eugene Collins. So 1 minute, Mr. Collins.
All righty. So first and foremost, I want to tell my colleagues that's on my call tonight that this has been a fun race, mostly clean, but you can't ask for too clean in politics. And it's been a pleasure running beside you all. And no matter what happens here over the next 6 days, you got my commitment that I'll work with you in whatever capacity. But just to say this, when we look at economic development in this community, we got to continue to look at investment in a multitude of ways, not only outside investment, but investment in the people, right? And I think there was some things that we can look at through job creation and getting creative about those things. When we talk about historical preservation, we have more communities in this district that could apply for historic charters or could apply to become historic districts. And I think we ought to take a closer look at that and some of the benefits that provide, right? And those are things that I want to accomplish if elected. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a public health professional, president of NAACP, and a kid of this district. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins. Okay, and I know that this is a quick intro, but we've got lots of questions, and this probably is your last forum. So, okay, we've all seen a lot from you all and heard a lot from you. So I think we'll move on now to Ms. Cozy.
Greetings. Thanks for hosting this forum tonight. Just to give you some information about myself, my name is Andrea Cozy. I'm a local business owner here in Baton Rouge. I live in the old South Baton Rouge area on Terrace. And since I'm on Terrace, I just had to give my little shout outs to New Ark Baptist Church and Cozy's House of Glamour right down the street from me, because these are historic areas in our neighborhood. I'm married into a family that's been in the community for over 100 years. And so I've heard every story about Newark and Old South Baton Rouge and every person that came out of our district and their history. And I think that is valuable and it's worth saving. And I feel like we need to really right now invest in our community, beautify it, and bring our historic district back to its former glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cozy. I'm trying to go in alphabetical order, so I'm, working my hardest here. So I think next is Ms. Marquita Cottenham.
Hi, I'm Marquita Cottenham. I'm actually a new member of the Historic Preservation Commission, so I'm big on historic preservation, especially within Baton Rouge, because it holds so much culture and so much history. I work hard to find buildings that I find that hold historic value, because we see a lot of our old buildings just being torn down because they're dilapidated or not being taken care of. And I tried to submit them to your department to see if they could have a historic designation. So I try hard, just me being an average citizen of the South. So, and when it comes to economic development, I think we could definitely center that around historic preservation, just more jobs of even taking care of the buildings that aren't being taken care of but have historic value. So I think that's just another way of adding more jobs, more city jobs to our community, putting money back into it. And of course, Old South, I think, has so much history, and it kind of saddens me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cottenham. Okay, we're going to move on to Mr. Jay Goday.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Goday, graduate of Southern University Criminal Justice Public Administration with a master's. I currently own a real estate sales and development firm, as well as sit on the Housing Authority Board for East Baton Rouge Parish and Urban Land Institute for Urban and Mixed Use Development. This is my wheelhouse when it comes to economic development, especially with me being a board commissioner with Housing Authority. These are some things that we not only know too well, but have been successful in, of submitting, historic tax credits and getting wins in that with the Renoir development. And as well as we just submitted a tax credit on Duane Street with the vision of redeveloping for investment in home ownership. So when you look at cultural and historic preservation, our city is in a generational shift. We are welcoming more cultural, more creators and entrepreneurs into the city, and we have to have things in our city that support that. So I look forward to talking with you guys even more about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to move on to Mr. Devontae Lewis.
Well, thank you so much for having us tonight. I'm Devontae Lewis. I'm number 132 on the ballot running for Metro Council here in District 10. I am the Director of Public Affairs and Outreach at the Louisiana Budget Project, which is an organization that works on issues that affect low and moderate income families, particularly through our budget and tax code. So this is an important conversation when we talk about historical preservation and economic development. One of the things that I think that is important, and this is an important topic, is because oftentimes we've seen more people, or some try to say that historical development and commissions and preservation has not been equitable, that it's been part of a white flight or some type of mixed gentrification. But we know that when you do it successfully, when you do it equitably, it is actually about building sustainable communities that respect culture, respect diversity, and that gives every person an opportunity to prosper. So I'm really looking forward tonight to talking more about that. But I am really running because I believe Baton Rouge could be the great American city.
Thank you so much, Devontae. So I think we're going to launch into our questions. And Brittany, I think you were up first.
Okay, the first question is, what investment have you already shown in this community that should, what investment have you already shown in this community that should make people vote for you? How do you differ from previous leadership for District 10?
So I think we would go ahead in alphabetical order. Mr. Anderson.
Okay, and is that specific to Old South or just the district as a whole?
The district as a whole.
Okay. Yeah, so like a lot of people that are running, I'm also a small business owner, Anderson Creative Strategies, and probably one of my faults, but also I think it's because I care a lot, is that most of the work that I do with Anderson Creative Strategies ends up being pro bono for small businesses, for attorneys that are just graduating from my alma mater, LSU, or from Southern, for nonprofits like the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison Reform Coalition. Ultimately, I end up using a lot of the skills that I thought I'd use to pay my bills. I actually end up using them to help seed small businesses that I believe in, or to help local candidates who are running that don't have a whole lot of money, like myself. I'll help them. I'll build websites for them and do things like that. In addition to that, as I mentioned in my intro, for the last 2 years, I've been organizing the My Louisiana Equality and Equity Summit. And the thing that's so valuable, I think, about that to the community is that we're bringing together folks that are working on a lot of issues of equity and equality from across the state to share resources, best practices, and to, in many ways, help collaborate on campaigns for social justice, where maybe Shreveport or New Orleans is advancing on the school to prison pipeline or bail reform. We can use those resources to be able to advance campaigns here. And so I've been really invested in doing that for the last 2 years. I think it's been a value added for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We do have to try to keep our responses to 1 minute. I know that this is like rapid fire, but we've got some good ones. So we just want to make sure everybody has a chance. Okay, so if I'm actually doing my alphabet correctly, we now have Mr. Eugene Collins.
All right, so I started my work in public health as an outreach worker. I worked for the Baton Rouge Society, and then transitioned to Metro Health Education, which is located out of the U.S. Butler Center. As an outreach worker, I will walk the streets of the district with condoms in my backpack and clean use kits and all those good things. So I started this work 17 years ago in public health, actually walking the streets and giving people healthcare messages. In the northern part of the district, I coached the football team for 10 years, the Baton Rouge Raptors. We pulled a lot of kids from the northern part of this district, and I coached those kids faithfully for 10 years and loved doing it. About 2 years ago, I wrote a historical district application for this organization. We got that funded to begin the work of the building and starting the work of forming the historical district in South Baton Rouge. Outside of that, in this particular district, when I was 17 years old, I sat on a District 6 school improvement team, which was the team that actually put together the efforts to save Dufrock Elementary as we know it is today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we're moving on to Ms. Andrea Cozy.
First investment that I made in South Baton Rouge was my home. And I was able to purchase that home because I invested first in my education. I attended school at Centenary College in Shreveport, was able to obtain a master's degree there, and continue to invest in my education so that I could obtain a neighborhood developer certification as well as a real estate license. I used that information from those businesses to help me to purchase properties in the community so that I could be an investor for the long haul and so that I could see our community thrive. With those properties, I was able to help people to obtain jobs. They helped me to renovate them, bring them back to life So I was able to work with the community and get to know them in a better manner. I also serve in North Baton Rouge as a commissioner on the North Baton Rouge Economic Development District Board. And there we invest in helping businesses and the city to help North Baton Rouge to thrive. Currently, I work as a business owner, and we provide grants and opportunities for students not only in the city, but in District 10 as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going on to Ms. Cottingham. 1 minute, Ms. Cottingham, to answer Brittany's question.
Yes, so right now I started Friends of Sweet Olive Cemetery nonprofit group in which we help maintain and keep up and fix up the cemetery, the Nationally Historic Black Cemetery. I also started, I've only been here for about 2.5 years, so I just started a Baton Rouge youth tennis advantage group. So I give out free tennis lessons to youth in the community. As well as I'm a volunteer for several different groups. One being the Lock Project, in which we give out breakfast and toiletry items every month, and as well as being a volunteer every summer, I go into the Fairfields area and I give students science lessons. So we do science projects in the park.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Cottingham. Okay, moving on to Mr. Goday.
Yeah, so I think my best investment that I've done to date has been a strategic partnership with my Home Start program with Housing Authority. And this program was through the nonprofit Restore the Block that was designed to transition blighted properties into home ownership opportunities. Me being a real estate professional, especially in the current market, you know, it's a seller's market, and we'd have a lot of buyers that get approved for property. And as soon as they get approved, they want to go into the outskirts. Well, the program was designed because we saw this years earlier that we work with Housing Authority with long-term renters to encourage them to buy property when they're looking to purchase a home within the neighborhood. So I think with that philosophy of transitioning blighted property into home ownership and working with Housing Authority was one of my best investments to date in the community.
Thank you so much. Mr. Devontae Lewis.
Yes, I would say some of the investments, or my best investment, really has been the policy work that I've been able to do for this entire parish, but especially for people who live here in District 10. I joined Councilwoman Green, and Step Up Louisiana was an instrumental in ensuring that we would pass or attempt to pass the resolution for local control of minimum wage and paid family leave, which unfortunately did not become successful. But that type of work is the engagement of doing it. And so we continued that while also working with Councilwoman Green to get the Pink Pack, which will now have their personal feminine hygiene products as well as diapers, which we fought very hard at the state capitol for, but didn't make it through. And so I think taking some of that policy work and then turning that also into action. So I'm one of the Club Blue at the Boys and Girls Club volunteers. So I'll be at the Alaska Street Recreational Center tomorrow with our makeshift haunted house that we aren't able to do fully like we've normally done the past few years because of COVID. But taking that engagement, not only from policy, but with our youth and young people, with the Boys and Girls Club and with the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition as an AP government tutor, I think are the best investments because I'm giving education.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so I've got the next question for all of you. Historic preservation is seen as a white dominant initiative, yet the benefits are for all communities. One of our efforts is to expand the knowledge of this by working with communities to hear their desires for redevelopment and community-led revitalization. How does historic preservation benefit District 10? And what benefits do you see of a coordinated effort for local, state, and federal district designations for the community? So we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Anderson again.
Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, how it benefits, I think it preserves the history, and Marquita said it really well. This is a culturally this is a culturally rich area. Our history is rich. The Old South is where a lot of the most important civil rights battles were fought, battles were planned in the Old South. And so preserving that history, I think, is of the utmost importance. I think that the Old South is probably one of the most historically rich areas of all of Baton Rouge. And so I think that that's a priority. The benefit of having a real coordinated effort at the federal, state, and local level, I think means that you're not, particularly for things like not just the Old South, but Marquita brought it up, Sweet Olive as well. You're not just depending on volunteers and individual donors to be able to maintain it. A designation is one thing, but when you have a coordinated all of government approach to making sure that you're not just designating things as historic, but you're preserving them, then we actually put some resources and funds behind actually preserving them and not just depending on volunteers to do so. So I think that would be a benefit, having a whole of government approach.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Collins, your thoughts.
So first and foremost, let me highlight how this organization, the Old South Baton Rouge Redevelopment District and Preserve Louisiana, how you guys work together at a few partners, NAACP. We were a part of that in writing that grant application. So those partners came together from the very beginning to protect the integrity of the process. When it happens in that way, we can assure that communities like these are protected. And so I think this organization already offers a powerful example of how this needs to be done. There just needs to be a commitment to doing it. And we didn't need to go outside to large organizations or large partners to get that done. There's a few of us in a room working together every step of the way, making sure that we all had the same goals for this community in mind. And when that happens, there's nobody that can beat us, right? So this model that you guys took with this, that's the example I would use and the example I would hope to perpetuate throughout this district.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Yes, it was a pleasure to work with everyone on the projects we've worked with the Butler House and also with Old South Baton Rouge. So, okay, so moving forward to Ms. Cozy's remarks on this.
You know, it's really wonderful when you can get people involved in the community. And it's great whenever you have organizations that are there to help preserve the local history of a community. Regardless of who leads the initiative, I believe that all people would like to see their community preserved, and would like to see their heritage preserved as well. And so I also applaud you for the work that you do in our community, because it is greatly appreciated. One of the ways that we could be more beneficial in working toward preserving our community would be to engage even more people, because we already know that you're having success because you've got some people involved. And we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be involved in our community. We want to make sure that if we want to be on the National Register of Historic Places, that everybody has an opportunity to participate in this endeavor, because the homes belong to private owners and we need them to participate to bring the projects to life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cozy. Okay, so it looks like Ms. Cottenham.
I believe a whole government approach would be simpler in terms of trying to cut through which avenues you go through in order to get certain places designated. I think it's super important to actually go in certain communities and get historical preservation designations, because like I said, it preserves the area. And when we do that, it causes people to pay attention, and it causes our city and our local government to take care of that a neighborhood. It's not just some poor neighborhood, it's a neighborhood who has culture and who has a history, even just developing cultural districts as opposed to historical districts, because being on the board, I know that not everybody wants to be a part of a historical district just because of some of the requirements it may have, but just being able to work together in order to make sure we do something where it still preserves, but it doesn't put all these strenuous requirements on residents and people and homeowners. But I definitely think it's absolutely needed, because if we lose our history, which I see a lot happening in Baton Rouge, we just have buildings knocked down. You just see empty lots of tiled floors. And you just wonder what was there. And we look back at pictures and wish you could preserve that. And
Absolutely.
I think
Thank you so much, Ms. Cottingham. Okay, Mr. Gode.
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that we're not the Baton Rouge that we were 30 or 40 years ago. You know, we have a younger population that enjoy culture and they enjoy lifestyle. And we're losing that population, you know, in record numbers. 2,700 people a year in the last 3 years are leaving to cities that offer those type of amenities. So I think it's something that we need to understand, that the culture is changing in the city when it comes to the generational change, and we need to adapt to that. And when it comes to the preservation, when you have the holistic approach with government when it comes to preservation, that eliminates the back and forth, the rigmarole, especially when you have developers that come in and they want to develop, but all they care about is the amount of money that they're going to make. That changes that perspective, because now they just can't focus just on their pockets. They have to make sure that the historic and culture is preserved in that community as well. So it don't eliminate the development from happening, but it gives an additional push to say, hey, this is what we want, this is how it needs to look, and this is how we want to move forward with it.
Thank you so much. Okay, and Mr. Devontae Lewis.
Yes, I think it's important that we recognize what culture means. I mean, I think that is part of what a thriving, sustainable community is about history. People want to move into neighborhoods that they love and that they feel connected to. So having historical preservation, I think, is extremely important. I think also what we have to do when we do that is also broaden kind of the scope and look at community budgeting, because that means we are putting the investments in walkability and playability in communities. So when you are talking about preservation or having developers or new economic opportunities coming into a community, it's not only solely about a building renovation, but it's about a holistic upbringing of the entire community, so people can actually live and socialize in the exact community that they want to. So I think we have seen creative models about how historic preservation, along with playability, most importantly walkability and city beautification, all play a hand. So I think of this as bringing in the Department of Public Works, bringing in recycling, talking about recreation and BREC, and making that also a part of the dialogue, because that's how you're going to build a sustainable community. So when you start to redevelop certain buildings or adjudicated property, you're also building up the entire community at the exact same time, and just flipping one building at a time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Those were all very thoughtful, wonderful answers. So great to hear from y'all. Brittany, I think you're up next with question number 3. And again, I think we have to apologize. I know this feels like rapid fire, but there was so much to cover. And of course, we are a little bit on the time crunch from the issue. So with entry to the meeting. So thank y'all for being so concise.
Okay, will there be a plan to create a community development committee with actual community residents to help promote community economic equity in the forgotten or forsaken sections of District 10?
So we're just gonna keep doing everything in alphabetical.
You know, y'all are so good at this. Quentin, thank you. You're like, it's my turn.
All right. No, that works. Yeah. So if I understand the question accurately, are you talking about like at the city parish level, a community development sort of committee, or
on a community, more so like on a community level, where it's a breakdown where you can get the focus and the problems from the individual community members in a smaller setting where it's possible, where they're able to possibly sit down with you and you get a list and you can figure out how to work through them, or, you know, is that something that you would? You know what, Brittany? We may be able to roll this into question 5, because I think that this is it may be. Yeah. You want to read question 5 too, just because we might be able to condense those two. Okay, I'm gonna let Miss Christine read that one. Great. Christine, do you want to introduce yourself though?
Certainly. I'm Christine Sparrow, President of South Baton Rouge Civic Association. I've been for several years now, and this is the question in addition to the one that was already asked. Will you commit to working with neighborhood associations, and what does that look like? For those neighborhoods that do not have organized organizations, will you assist them in establishing such an entity? How will you work with them? How will you prove accountability?
Yeah. Okay. So now that actually, I think those two questions do work really well together. So originally, in the first part of the question, I thought that it was the city parish creating this thing, and I wouldn't be in favor of that. What I would be in favor of, though, is being able to support community development corporations and just neighborhood associations, and being able to offer them funding, but they need their own autonomy because they are closest to the people, they're closest to the pain, they're closest to the goals, the aspirations of that community. And as a result, similar to how elected officials will go and stop by at Together Baton Rouge or some of these other groups to not only get the pulse of what's going on with those groups, but also to get ideas about where people want to see, what direction people want to see their city parish government going in. That's how I would interact with these community groups and these neighborhood associations, which I think particularly in the Black community, we need more of them, because collective organized people, that's real power. And so I would be in strong favor of being able to provide seed grants for those sort of groups in places where they don't exist already. But I would be wary of the government being the people that organizes that. Those groups, ultimately, I'd look to be the people that hold the government accountable.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Collins. I don't even feel like I need to tell y'all. I think you're just like, Quentin, Mr. Anderson did. You just kind of boogie on. But
All right. Can I get the question one more time?
Absolutely.
Will you commit to working with neighborhood associations, and what does that look like for you? For those neighborhoods that do not have organized associations, will you assist them in establishing such an entity? How will you work with them, and how will you improve accountability?
So one thing I think, in addition to working with the neighborhood association, I absolutely commit to that. But I think something else that we can do is in these neighborhoods that don't have these entities. We know some of these entities exist in mid-city, but looking at former nonprofits, 501c3s, 501c4s, organizations that can deal with the needs of the neighborhoods outside of just government, right? Creating that kind of checks and balances system, making sure that groups like your group, Ms. Christine, down in the Butler Center, that you have that 501c3 and that ability to apply for funding sources outside of just city government and not being dependent on that system totally. And I think that's something that we can build in other areas and use the models that we already have in place, like what we see with the Downtown Development District, what we see with mid-city merchants. Use those models and teach each other. And in the same time, we get the mid-city merchants out there at banks helping teach that work. We're starting to tackle that unity issue because we're starting to meet people in diverse settings. And we know that some of these things are already happening on some levels, but I think that's something that we can increase. And so I definitely commit to that. And I think that there's some other things we can do to make that process better.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. Cozy.
So candidate number 129, Cozy. I definitely commit to civic organizations. I believe that in the past, when I'm walking around talking to some residents, I hear people and they want to know that their representative is there for their community. They want to know that they can reach out to their representative and have their concerns heard. I think that it's important that the community meets together, talks together, and discusses exactly what it is that we need to move our community forward. We know that we need to improve our educational opportunities and invest in higher educational and job training opportunities in our community. We know that we are also going to need to link our classes. We need to make sure that we have a mixed income neighborhood so that we can have a variety of people to interact with and to move our community toward being an inclusive middle class community. And so that's definitely going to take some conversations and interactions with our government officials. And so definitely I commit to working with associations and establishing associations.
Thank you so much.
Number 129 commits.
Thank you, Ms. Cozy. Ms. Cottenham.
Short answer, yes, I do. I do commit to it because I think the best way to become the best person, just a best community member, regardless of what role you're playing in it, is to go to the meetings that are involved in your community in order to see other people's mindset. Because your issues may not be someone else's issues, because I know the area I live in, down the street is totally different from up the street. So going to those meetings, I think, is super important, and being involved and showing, being able to be accountable for those changes is just by making sure that not only do you go to those meetings, but you have those checks and balances to where, hey, this is what we need to be done. Let's come back to it in a week or so, 2 weeks, a month, and see what has been done and go from there. Because if nothing's being done every single time we go to a meeting, that's pointless. So we definitely have to work together and involve ourselves in each other. No more separation.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Goday. And if you all would like to request for the question to be repeated, please don't hesitate to ask that.
But yes, I would definitely be willing to do that. And I'm not sure if anybody had the chance. If you didn't, I would encourage you to check out my 90-day plan. You could text GoDay to 76626, and you'll see that starting January of 2021, that is one of the first things that I'm gonna be looking to do, is we will be having district community meetings to give the opportunity for the entire community to meet as a body. And we're gonna be doing this every quarter, because I truly believe that you can't build a community without the community. And if we look around District 10 and we look around Baton Rouge, we don't have an issue with planning. We don't have an issue with organizing. We have an issue with consistency. As I've been canvassing these neighborhoods and talking to residents, the most thing I've heard is that I have not been able to reach my council person. I have not been able to do this. I have not been able to do that. And trust me, I get it. You know, it's a big district. It's a lot of people. But having district community meetings every quarter, that holds not only the council person accountable, but that gives the opportunity for the entire community to meet as a body and network and coordinate with people that they may not necessarily see. So if you check out my 90-day plan, you'll see that it's definitely something that I'll be willing to do and will be implementing once I'm elected.
Thank you so much. And if I've gone back from calling you Ms., Mr., from your first name to your last name, I think that's not a bad sign. It means we've all connected in some way. So please don't take offense. So I'm sorry if I haven't been consistent in that way. You all have my utmost respect. Okay, Mr. Lewis.
Absolutely, I would commit. And I think when we were talking about community organizations and just community involvement, I think it is on everything. So it's not solely just about building up neighborhood associations, but it's about making sure neighborhoods understand what and are knowledgeable about what everything is going on in city government. So that is with community budgeting. So we are talking about it, as I mentioned earlier. That is also points of fact of matter when we were talking about permits and development, that the community is actually, I mean, I think we have to step up. I've heard the same things, and that's why I'm proud I'm not endorsed by the current seat holder, because I don't think she's been engaged with this community fully. Certain parts of the area, but I think we have to recognize community engagement, community involvement from a member of Metro Council is not listening just to the people that are well connected and have the most money to donate to you, but also the people whose communities deserve to have leaders who show up. So that's showing up on 72nd Street. That's showing up in the banks. That means being physically present outside of a meeting just to know what's going on in your district. And so that's the type of commitment you will get from me if
Can you all hear me still? Okay, I'm getting some light flickering. I tend to be in a vulnerable spot in the city. I thought that we had this pass through, but I do want to apologize if by some chance we lose power. Okay, so the next question is from us from a historic preservation standpoint. Our city and our state and our landscape, we are fortunate based on the historic tax credit that we enjoy through our cultural district, the federal historic tax credit that we enjoy through our national register districts. And we are the entity that advocates for these on the state and federal level. Often when I'm in Washington, D.C. and asking for support for these programs, I'm asked how our local municipalities are implementing plans to mirror these efforts, We are lacking in a residential tax credit that failed to pass our state legislation a couple of years ago. We lost that program. It was heartbreaking for all of us. What are your ideas for a local parish-wide incentive around preservation? Have you thought about this? How do you feel about tax abatement? What are your ideas in general around how our local municipality can benefit historic preservation and initiatives in that sense?
Yeah, so I think, as I said earlier, I think part of actually putting some teeth into local historic preservation is actually putting some money, some resources behind it. So that means, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. It should not be on people like Marquita and a group of volunteers to maintain things that the city has said are historic landmarks that we claim that we want to preserve. Let's actually put some money behind doing that. The Sweet Olive Cemetery has been one of the most tragic examples of us essentially saying that we respect our history, but we clearly aren't putting our money where our mouth is. I mean, you have tombstones that are broken. You have some of those areas where I'm scared to walk through there because I think I'm going to see a skeleton. I mean, it is falling apart, but we say that that's important. It's not important unless you put money behind it. I think the other thing, just more broadly about how our municipality funds just everything that we say is important, I think that we have to start talking about revenue, and that doesn't mean raising taxes on poor people by raising the sales tax. It doesn't mean raising taxes on homeowners. I think what it means is starting to make big multi-billion-dollar companies pay their fair share instead of bending over backwards to give them tax breaks, and then we don't have enough money to fund the things that we claim are our priorities.
Well, originally in this question was a more detailed question about the difference between tax abatement and ITEP, but I left that out for us to not have to talk about ITEP.
I would have gone on a tirade, so thank God.
Yeah, I'm sure you all would have, because I think everyone on this call understands that tax abatement is not ITEP. Okay, so moving on to Mr. Collins.
So, my answer won't differ a lot from Quentin's answer, right? I think there has to be more investment into protecting these structures. We look at one of our historic structures here in South Baton Rouge with the Butler House. That house was sinking. That should not happen in 2020. We should have a better account of where our history exists. Marquita spoke to this earlier when she walked past and she see the tiles and wonder what existed there. We have to know the history of the buildings in this district and protect those buildings, right? But some of those buildings, let's just keep it real, are falling down at the current moment, right? So we have to protect what we have and preserve that historical integrity. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. What are we going to do to support historic preservation? And I think the first thing is finding funding to be able to restore the structures that exist, or bringing in developers to restore the structures that exist, to make sure that we preserve that historical integrity. And not only that, when we look at areas expanding, right, and some of the issues that they're having around parking, we got to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Okay, Ms. Cozy.
So just because a building is designated as a historical building doesn't mean that funding is going to come along with that building. And so I understand that the Office of Historical Preservation is looking for ways to fund the historic preservation process. And we need to look at things like maybe zoning changes, subsidies, tax incentives. We really need to look at how to incentivize businesses and individuals to invest in our community so that people actually have a choice about where they live. And the more that we can provide income and opportunities to obtain income in our community, the more opportunities we'll have to actually invest and preserve the buildings within the community. So it definitely starts with having a plan of grants and opportunities available to the residents so that we can enhance our community and preserve it historically.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cozy. Ms. Cottenham.
Almost exactly what Quinn said, and as well as Mr. Collins, because it pretty much is mirror how I feel. We just need to put money into those places, because if you don't put money into them, you can't preserve them. I also think that we need to do better as a city government in actually logging our buildings and logging our historical places, or even potentially historic places, even if they don't get the same designation from, say, Louisiana as they would nationally. So I just think we need to do a better job at that, because even me doing the research on several different buildings within District 10, just to find the history to even submit something to the historic preservation is definitely, it's hard, and so it's about knowing our history and putting money back into that history, because there's plenty of buildings like Ms. Andrea Cozy said, there's plenty of buildings who have historic designation and not getting any money, and they're still boarded up and they still look really bad. We got, like everyone said, do better.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Okay, Mr. Gode.
Yeah, so the entire Thomas H. Delpit Street is a wealth of culture and history. You drive down that street, you walk down that street, you just see dilapidated buildings that was once something with a thriving community where people actually were a real community. We have to realize that at this present moment, Baton Rouge is not big business. So the representative of this district, the representative of the city, has to be more of an advocate of promoting investment in this community. There's developers, there's an investment busting down doors to go develop in the French Quarter of New Orleans or the Garden District of New Orleans. But we have to do a better job of showing that our city has a culture, our city has an opportunity, our city needs investment, and being able to work and promote that to be able to bring funding into our community. Just like everybody else said just a minute ago. Historic preservation means resources, it means money. But if we don't go out there and look for it, if we don't do what we have to do and present it, it's not going to just come knocking on our door.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gode. Okay, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, I think my colleagues have said so many great things, and so I'm not going to belabor kind of the points I think we all agree on. I think what we have to recognize is how much we can use historic preservation as an avenue for affordable housing. We've seen Orleans do this very successfully. So I think fighting the state and actually pushing maybe a local historical tax credit that is giving developers some cost reductions to do that, but also putting in protections to ensure that we are making sure that we're protecting affordable housing, because I think one of the challenges we can't do is just be open up for developers, because just because developers come in doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be doing the actual preservation that keeps people within the community. We don't want to turn South Baton Rouge into the Bywater where you've pushed everybody out. So we have to be very careful when we say, let's just make ourselves available to developers if we're not putting the safeguards in for the people that actually live within the community. So that goes back to some of the other things that I talked about when we were talking about budgeting and replayability, making sure the community is at every aspect of it and not just the developers.
Thank you. And I wanted to follow up with this question because obviously we don't want to put things in your head before you respond, but there were a couple things that I wanted to mention, and that's important as you may be the future leader of this district. And that is that the only protection that is provided to our structures, our buildings, whether that's the Leo S. Butler House that we just had designated as a local entity, is our local designations to prevent them from being demoed. Our National Register does not protect that. Our cultural districts do not protect that. And it's very important for us to look at this as on a municipal level for incentives. And New Orleans has a really wonderful program to look at, the Revival Grants program. So I just want to encourage all of you, whoever wins, to really look at that local incentive, because it's going to be key as we move forward. So thank y'all. Turning it over to Brittany again.
Okay, so the question that I have is, at the end of last year, one of the historic YMCA's that is actually on Thomas H. Delpit, which is the Barranco Clark YMCA, was started to have money issues, and it ended up being shut down in the middle of the pandemic starting in March. If you were put in office, what would be your goal as far as making sure that youth organizations or youth centers are available in the Old South Baton Rouge area? Because as of right now, there may be one or two, but the number of youth organizations are declining. So if you were put in office, would one of your goals be to find ways to increase more, to get more youth organizations in the area?
Yeah. So I can't imagine, unless your name is Lucifer, that you say no to that that proposition. Yeah, no, of course, but also
if you hate children, you know.
I don't know that that's a winning demographic there. The people that hate kids.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm sorry, because I may have phrased it wrong, because what happened is that when it came into, usually what they're saying is that because they once the issue was brought to the council person,
yeah,
we were not aware. So what ended up happening is that it shut down, and now for us to even get this, like, we've had multiple meetings, and to try to get the center open back up, it's going to cost at least $150,000. Even with us raising $150,000, it's still not a guarantee that they're going to be able to open that center back up now. And the center has been around since like 1920.
Yeah, so absolutely, and this sort of goes, there's kind of a common theme in this conversation, which is that if we say that something is a priority of our city parish government, that we need to actually put some force behind it. So sometimes that means money, sometimes that means responsiveness and advocacy on the part of the council person that represents the areas that are subject to that sort of thing. I think broadly, because it's sort of a two-part question, broadly, I think that we need to have more opportunities available for young people. So that means, more support for youth centers. I think that also means renovating the libraries that are in the Black community, like we renovate the libraries that are in the white community. So the library that's on Independence is awesome. The downtown library is awesome. Not the libraries in our community. The libraries in our community typically look the same way. They don't always have the newest books. They don't always have the newest amenities. And that is also a recreation center for young people. And I've also talked about having a youth jobs program because youth unemployment is skyrocketing in this town. And that's a big deal. Young people over the age of 16, they want to work. They want to make money. And particularly in our community, oftentimes they are almost equal breadwinners in their homes. And so being able to give young people jobs, I think, would also be able to address that. If I could just say one last thing, is that she mentioned the responsiveness of that this had been brought up to the council beforehand, or to that council person. That council person is Tara Wicker, and Tara Wicker's candidate is Jay Goday. You can't criticize the responsiveness of the council person. So you do need a council person that tells you when there are threats to your community, whether those are deadly threats or those are economic threats.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, so we're gonna move on to, and now I changed my page. Our next one, I believe, is Mr. Collins. Am I correct there in our alphabet? Yes.
Hey, thank you. So first and foremost, the YMCA has a golf tournament coming up. It's $250 for a whole sponsorship. So Jay, Quentin, Brittany, Devontae, Ms. Cozy, whoever else, let's call the Y at least play for a whole sponsorship, help towards that fundraising goal. And outside of that, I was a board member at the YMCA for some time. I was a baseball coach. I coached in the baseball lead there at the YMCA for some time as well. And I played basketball at the YMCA back in the Gap. So when we look at all of those things and we start talking about crime and we get into that conversation, we're never going to affect those things if centers like these keep closed. So we have to find a way to keep centers like this open. And not only that, we got to have folks there to staff these centers, folks there to help with our youth, mentoring programs. And that's not something that's just solely dependent on city government, I believe. I believe that's something that we can look for outside resources for, not just through investors, but through some of the federally funded projects, through grant opportunities, through forming some of those entities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Okay, moving on to Ms. Cozy.
I'm disappointed to hear that the YMCA in our neighborhood will be closing. The Barranco YMCA, that's one of the places that I hear about and from the residents as being there for the community. But we need to repurpose the buildings in our district. We have a history of buildings closing that have a long history, and we need to find out what we can do to help preserve them. The YMCA is a membership-based organization, so we know that the money was coming from the memberships. And so when we do have fundraisers, yes, we do want to support their efforts. Basically, we've got the Leo Butler Center. We've got that is servicing some senior activities, but we could use that building a lot more effectively. We could use it for different recreational activities for people of all ages and in between. There are some programs there. We need more. We also need to look at using these buildings in a manner that will benefit the youth. We have many children in the district who are walking the streets because we don't have sidewalks. They're looking for things to do. The library is there, it's productive, but we need more. And educational opportunities is the more that we need. And we need to bring businesses in and attract businesses who can actually provide more opportunities for our youth.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cozy. Okay, we're going to move on to Ms. Cottingham.
I'm very passionate about youth programs. I absolutely love the YMCA. I grew up, worked there, volunteered there, did YMCA's Youth in Government. And to see that it closed in one of our predominantly Black neighborhoods within Louisiana is really sad, just because that means the kids of those neighborhoods won't be able to participate in youth in government. That means they won't be able to take over their government, learn how to write laws, a lot of things that I learned how to do. So I think that there's a need to make sure that we keep places like that open. It's sad that it was brought to someone's attention and it's still closed. Again, like Ms. Cozy said, she said they're driven by membership. So we want to make sure that we're helping those areas out to make sure that they can give out scholarships for membership, because YMCA isn't cheap. I had to work in order to actually have a YMCA membership. So I completely understand it. But we also need to make sure that we're utilizing the buildings, the BREC buildings that we have at each park, and making sure that we're reopening those and having a free place for people to actually, for children and people of all ages to engage in. Some of the older buildings that we have closed down, we need to make it to community centers for youth and seniors, people in between. So I definitely think it's a need that we have to make sure that we continuously are on. Mayor's Youth Employment Program, we need to initiate. And we just need to make sure we're more proactive with our youth, because our youth are our future. They're gonna be running the city one day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cottingham. All right, Mr. Gode.
Yes, well, let me thank Mr. Anderson for that good press that he gives all the time. And but I want to start off by saying, firstly, you know, I've spent 5 years with juvenile services. Reason why I'm in the generation of leadership. That agency has a wealth of youth pro-social activities, but there's a gap. There's a transportation gap. So again, if you go back to my 90-day plan on my site or with my text code, you'll see the revitalization of the Butler Center gives us the opportunity to make sure that a private entity, if something happens, that we are still being able to service the youth. Now, the Butler Center is totally underutilized. So we definitely have to use it to its full capacity, which would mean partnering with an agency like Juvenile Services to have referral sources for pro-social activities for youth that are ongoing and long-standing, and bridging that gap with that organization and the Butler Center to make sure that we're continuing those services. Also with the services the programs that I've already developed, you know, Breeding Bosses Camp, the Yeti program, And I'll just be looking to further endorse those programs through the Butler Center through revitalization.
Thank you, Mr. Gode. Okay, so now we're moving on to, I believe, Mr. Lewis. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Y'all have this down better than I do. I have to keep flipping back. Okay.
I mean, hey, it's not often when you're an L, you're the last person to speak. So I've gotten
Right?
to being the last one. No, I think after school programming and youth programming is extremely important. I mean, I was an elementary school teacher, and I can tell you the importance that it means for young people. I remember my days at the YMCA when I did summer camps. And so I think part of it is about having responsive leadership. That means you are reflecting to the community and not to the big wigs and not to the big donors. I think secondly, what you also have to do when you're talking about youth programs is look at the reasoning of investments and what that means for communities. I think Jay's right when you talk about transportation, but you can't stop at transportation. You have to also add in childcare, because one of the barriers for after school programming is if those youth services do not align with the parent's schedule. So when we're talking about kind of building up a sustainable community for youth, we have to have a 2-generation solution. And I think that's been one of our problems in policy, is oftentimes we want to address youth, but we don't want to address their parents. And if you're not addressing their parents with good paying jobs, with fair access to a fair schedule, to reliable transportation, to stable housing, your youth center, your youth program is not going to benefit that youth, because they're not going to have the connectivity there. So when we talk about youth services, I'm a strong believer you got to talk about it in 2 generations. How are you helping the youth, but also how are you helping the parent to be able to, and the guardian, to be part of the solution with that. So I would be a big supporter. I'm gonna take Eugene up on his challenge, and I will definitely be donating. But I think it's also about having a visionary leadership in our district who is looking at not only the public investments that we have to make, but making sure that private philanthropy matches the public investments to make sure that we have a 2-generational solution.
Thank you so much. And that is wow, that you're the last one with the last name out. Okay, so I'm going to take a couple of my questions and combine them in a way that I think makes sense, but in the respective time. So there were 2 things I wanted to talk about, and it was funding for surveying, which is required for establishing our districts, which is a barrier to establishing districts that our underserved communities don't always have access to. Most of that funding comes from grants on a federal level that require a 50% match. And we all know how difficult that is. Brittany can speak to that directly. Eugene can speak to that directly. We're challenged about how to get those dollars just to survey our neighborhoods to prove their worth. So there's another hot topic that has come up, and I'm going to tie these together. Short-term rentals has been an issue across the board, across the country, and we are not immune to this. Obviously we are a statewide organization, so we've worked in New Orleans on this. I've testified before their city council. There are ideas, and there were ideas, and a committee created to regulate these short-term rentals. And in Spanish Town and Beauregard Town, people are worried about a lack of residents and the disintegration and the care of their structural history and also their cultural fabric. But as incentives for redevelopment increase in South Baton Rouge and are actualized, we can't ignore the possible redevelopment that could cause displacement of the people that make up the cultural fabric of that area. So what role would you play in being creative in the regulation of these short-term rentals to possibly create a revenue stream for our city that could then be put back in for more surveying and creation of districts to support our cultural and architectural history? So we'll start with Quentin, Mr. Anderson.
Quentin, George, I mean, it doesn't matter at this point. I know that I'm up. Okay. So broadly, actually, we're sort of having this issue with the short-term rentals in terms of sort of devaluing neighborhoods and cheapening neighborhoods. And so one of the things that we want to do is I think we just want to be smarter about our regulations. of short-term rentals. I know Devontae's going to hate me for this, but I'm probably going to steal his idea about tying your ability to do short-term rentals to having a homestead exemption. It was a good idea, and so I'm going to steal it. And hopefully we have the benefit of that from this entire field for whoever wins, because, for example, being able to secure grants to be able to fund having a surveyor, I think that Eugene is awesome at that, and hopefully if I win, I can lean on Eugene. But I think one of the priorities for my office would be making sure that my administrative assistant also has a background in grant writing, so that they can be a support system for being able to apply for these grants. That's going to be a priority of mine. We don't have a lot of resources as council people, but that is a resource, and I'm just going to overwork my administrative assistant to make sure that we are supporting the neighborhoods so that they're not having to shoulder this burden alone.
Well,
Go ahead.
your time is up, Quentin, so I'm going to just add to that. But, you're not alone. This committee that was created, there are people like myself and Brittany, everybody who is engaged in this. So are you telling me that short-term rentals has come up before this forum?
It has.
Yes. Okay. I'm just glad to know y'all have talked about this. So wonderful. Okay.
It's a gift and a curse.
It absolutely is. Yes. So, and moving forward, we'll keep going, but just know that I'm a resource, knowing that I've worked on this too. Okay. So we're going to move forward to Mr. Collins.
Yeah, I think Mr. Anderson brought up some great points, and Devontae highlighted it, I think, in one of the last forums we did, making sure that, there's some teeth in the folks that actually do these short-term rentals, that they have some investment in the community. And I think that's one of those things that's a policy problem, right? And shoring up the policy reduces some of those issues. So I think we got to look at that particular piece of it in that kind of vein. And the other aspects, I think Mr. Anderson is exactly right. We got to look at grant making. We got to look at grant making to support some of these efforts. Far too much do we just go to the city council and argue for a line item. We have to look at grant making and making sure that we have the ability to acquire outside funds and let it not always come through outside investors. We have the ability to organically generate these things. What happens is there's less control of the entities when it comes. So when we have that conversation about gentrification, Brittany Zeno, who is leading the charge on making South Baton Rouge a historical district, guess what she's not going to let happen? Gentrification, because that's a community effort. We got to have more community efforts.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Collins. Okay, we're moving on to Ms. Cozy.
All right, thank you. So we've really got to, as residents of our community, invest and make sure that our council person is investing in good urban policies that will bring economic development to our districts. And yes, short-term rentals have come up before. When I was out canvassing in Spanish Town, some of the residents are in favor of having access to their own property. One of the benefits to being a property owner is being able to rent your residence out and not paying short-term capital gains taxes immediately. You pay your taxes at the end of the year. You don't have to pay quarterly. And so when people own property that they've had for hundreds of years, one of the benefits is being able to rent it out for income. So we do want to make sure that we keep money circulating in our community. So we don't want to hold people back from making money that could be moving throughout our community. We also want to make sure that we don't gentrify our communities and make them so that people cannot afford to be there.
Thank you so much.
Right, thank you.
Okay, I think we're moving on to Ms. Cottingham.
Yes, I am totally against gentrification. I think there's a way to revitalize a neighborhood without gentrifying it. I lived in a neighborhood in San Francisco that was gentrified, so I know all about it and how we had to actually reverse the whole thing and try to move back from gentrification to move some more residents back in. So I think that it's important that we have regulations on things such as Airbnb and things like of that nature. Yes, people want to make money, but it also can also bring housing value down if homes stay vacant a lot, because right now we need to focus more on how we are going to actually have more people come into Baton Rouge in the tourist area to allow people to continue to have a whole bunch of short-term rentals. I think that's important that we make sure that we're regulating that strictly. And it should be per neighborhood. It should, and we should make sure we survey that. And of course, the grant writing. I totally and completely agree with that, because if we don't have someone there to help with the back end, we're not going to be able to get the funds.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Gode.
So I totally agree that we need to have some regulations on short-term rentals, especially in communities. Communities are made to be a community. So if people are frequent in those communities and living in having whole house short-term rentals, that takes away from the aspect of the actual community. So I definitely agree with that. But even to move a little bit further along that, when we talk about gentrification, right now in South Baton Rouge, there's 20 companies or slash individuals that own 355 properties in South Baton Rouge. If we don't look at changing the city code and the blight ordinances, that allows these people to hoard these properties until they can decide what they want to do with them, as long as they cut the grass and board up the windows. So when we talk about building investment, we can't build investment if the next door neighbor that's been living next to a rundown house for 25 years can't even have the opportunity to buy it for her family or for her children. And we can't promote home ownership in the community because the whole block is blighted and vacant and nobody wants to live there. So we have to look at, like somebody said earlier, we have to look at changing the blight ordinances and the city codes to be able to bring investment back into the community.
Thank you, Mr. Gode. You're getting ahead of us, which that was going to be a passionate next topic, I'm sure, which I know we're running out of time, but we may be able to condense some of those questions around that if y'all can stick around for just a little bit longer. Okay, Devontae, Mr. Lewis.
Absolutely. I will yield kind of my first point to my friend Quentin, who eloquently articulated my view, which is, yes, I believe we should tie short-term rental licenses to homestead exemption. I would actually go a step further, kind of adopting the model where you get one permit per homestead exemption, and that you have to, and maybe even a policy where you have to live on the property. That reduces the likelihood of big parties, that reduces the likelihood of developers just taking the property and using a homestead exemption. Secondly, I think what you have to do is you have to put these same procedures all across the city parish. I think one of the challenges you'll see is commercial zones, maybe downtown, will ask for a different type of permitting for short-term rentals, and what you'll start to see, like what we saw where I live, is where apartment complexes and condominiums become defunction, almost commercial properties, to go adjacent of the rules of what short-term rental should be. And lastly, to kind of get to the heart of your question about funding, I think what we should do is we should adopt what New Orleans did and put a nightly fee on short-term rentals, somewhere between $8 to $12, and we could dedicate that to processes of affordable housing, but also as surveying, and put that into our historical preservation, our affordable housing trust fund that then is allocated out by Metro Council or even a commission. So I think we can be very creative in the way we regulate, but also the way that we raise funds within using and recognizing kind of the growing Airbnbs, VPNOs that are existing. So I think it's a combination of looking at how we're utilizing it to protect affordable housing, but we can also use it as an innovative way to raise revenue that can provide for the needs to continue the preservation that we want to see.
Thank you. You all touched on some very important things just then that I think I'm going to expand a little bit, because I texted Brittany and she didn't tell me I couldn't. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this a little bit. I think what we were trying to get to was, is there a way to regulate, possible development and commercial development that then we can pump those dollars back into thoughtful investment into the community, and you all pretty much hit on that. But this brought us into another question that I was going to we were going to ask. Both Brittany and I had different thoughts about this. I mean, not different, the same thoughts, but there's multiple questions, and you all touched on it. It's blight, and it's blight versus demo. So, we have a city that is very quick to label a property whether it's based on issues with title or many issues, condemned and, you know, ready for demo. You know, some of the programs or projects we just talked about could possibly fund a program that would reassess these structures for revitalization. Thus, we would not lose the character of these neighborhoods and people could keep their homes. So what kind of innovative ideas do you have around, you know, revitalization as far as we go from, you know, actually stabilization versus demo? So we'll start with you, Mr. Anderson.
Okay. Yeah, so actually, you know, blight is probably the most frequent topic of all the forums that we've been a part of. So we've actually had some practice on some of these policies, and I actually see it as a unique opportunity to address a couple of different issues. First of all, we do want to make sure that blighted properties that are beyond repair do get demolished and get demolished as quickly as possible, because we don't want them to be hubs of crime, and we don't want them to be hubs of other negative things in the community. But I really am hesitant about giving up on any of these homes if we don't have to. I would be in favor of three things. One is rolling increasing fines on blight property owners to be able to force them to maintain the property, or be a forcing mechanism for them to sell it. And in the cases where those fees get to be exorbitant, seizing those properties, renovating those properties, and then reselling those properties to qualifying graduating students of LSU, Southern, LTC, BRCC, people who are looking for the place where they're going to make their home for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Let's give them an incentive. Let's put them into our community, give them something that gives them a vested interest in Baton Rouge long-term, while also addressing the issue of blight and the brain drain. I think that we can do two things at once, and I think that that's the sort of innovative approach that I think that we have to take to blight if we actually want to address it, because this is an epidemic that's plaguing a lot of cities, whether they're the size of Baton Rouge or they're the size of New York.
Thank you so much. Mr. Collins.
Fairly, I love the first part of your question, right? Because growing up in this community, I remember it was a place down on Kentucky Street I used to go to get my hair cut, right? And across the street, there was a man living in a house that some of us today would consider blight, but that was his house, right? And I don't know if there was running water. I know there wasn't electricity, but so we have to first define what blight is. And before we start to just knock stuff down, we got to first go out and make sure that folks aren't living in these properties. And that's a real thing. When you're from here, you know that, right? And then outside of just that, we got to look at some incentives around this stuff, incentives around keeping the property up, and not just so fast to put a sign on the door, but we don't want to not put a sign on the door either if it's taking too long. So I think that's going to be a fair balance, a fair middle, but I think we got to first define blight and know that blight in South Baton Rouge and blight in Banks and blight in Spanish Town and blight in Ogden Park might be different things. You can't take a cookie cutter approach to it.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. Thank you, Eugene. We all have different perspectives of blight. Yes. Okay. So now we're moving on to Ms. Cozy.
All right. So I appreciate Eugene mentioning the fact that the homes that we target to tear down actually do belong to somebody, and it may contain people that live in these homes. So we want to be careful about designating homes to be torn down. Also, we want to look at the fact that blight does look different in different places. Okay, blight in Old South Baton Rouge community may look like overgrown weeds and boarded up houses. Blight in Spanish Town may look like somebody moving in for short-term, having short-term rental residents, bringing down the property value. But in each community, the one thing that I do value is our freedom. And so when we talk about changing districts into historical districts, you have to think about the restrictions that it will place on residents. And maybe we need to look at zoning as well. There are areas of our community where people want to open businesses, but it's zoned residential. There are places where people want to have multifamily short-term rentals, but it's zoned single-family residential. And so we really want to work with the needs of the residents and the community to determine what zoning we need in our communities that will benefit everybody.
Thank you so much, Ms.
And so I think that it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Cottingham.
I think blight is a huge issue here, and people call me crazy, but if we're just going to take the properties and tear them down just for it to be an empty lot that we do not take care of as a city, I just think we should give it away. If we're gonna seize the properties, why not turn them into affordable housing for the homeless? I have an entire homeless encampment behind my house, and I don't want to clean it up because where would they go? But there's tons of houses around the corner from my house that are empty, completely empty and completely usable. And they're some of the owners are waiting for gentrification. Some are nowhere to be found. So I just think that we need to solve the issue of homelessness and poverty, and we need to give away these homes, and we need to create jobs. We need to create a city build program where we have jobs, where we're training people to rebuild these homes, rehabilitate these homes, and in that way the ownership could become, they're not paying rent, they're paying a mortgage, and they're paying it to the city, and we're getting that money back. So I just think that we need to be smart about what we do, and if we are going to tear down a house because it's not livable, then we need to make a green space, we need to make more parks, we need to make more community centers.
Thank you, Ms. Cottingham. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Gode.
So foundationally, no blight plan works unless we address the city code and the blight ordinances. Because as long as the burden is on the city to either condemn or to address blight, then it doesn't happen. The burden has to shift to the property owner, which that's where it should be because it's their property. So regardless on what they decide to do with it, we don't care if they want to sell it, whatever they decide, but it cannot be an eyesore. It can't bring the value down of the rest of the neighborhood. And that's where you see HOAs in your more affluent communities. And not saying that we need HOAs, but it puts the burden on the property owner, saying that if you don't do something with this property, then we can't keep having it like this in our community. There's over 6,000 blighted properties in the parish as a whole. And we talk about funding, but something that's a commodity as real estate, it's shackled on how it can be put back into commerce. Transforming blight into home ownership is what's going to build investment back into the community. That's what we have to do, but it starts with the policy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gode. Okay, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, I'm a strong believer in the blight to bright programs that we've seen work in Pennsylvania. We work in Colorado Springs and across the country. And so I think there's multiple things that you have to do. I think Jay's right. You have to actually adopt a standardized code procedure. But I think the two things that you do with revenue is you have to have a rental property registration as well as a vacant property registration, where we have the actual contact information for the owners. Because one of the challenges we find in blight is oftentimes the blighted property, as we've mentioned earlier, has people living in it. It's normally a rental property, and that rental and the property owner is getting away because they're not part of the city registry. So I think when you add them, you make them pay a fee to register themselves as a rental property or as an owner of a vacant lot. You take those funds and then you use them adequately as part of a reinvestment conservation fund that we've seen other cities do, that can then also provide some of the safety and upkeep needs that other communities and other blighted properties may need. I think you also do some pre-sale inspections for properties, because one of the things that we do is we don't actually do those items. And so when you take kind of this holistic approach of looking at blight, and not just kind of in the terms of all the property must be condemned, but you also hold the owners accountable. And I'm not talking about owners who are elderly. I'm talking about owners who have bought properties and now using them as rental or vacant lots, who therefore now are abusing the code. Then you can start to have the reinvestment in the.
Yes, thank you. And you know, I wouldn't be doing my job if I also didn't reiterate a lot of what you all said. There are really great programs around the country. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You know, and there are programs that are not just focused on putting the blame and the onus on the homeowner, because many of these properties there are multiple people involved in the titles, and we never know what hardships they've fallen upon. So there are often community pots that are put together by fees accumulated from other violations that then can go in for people to apply for grants to actually revitalize their homes, as opposed to having to agree to demolition. So I just want to put that out there, because one of you will be our District 10 representative, and I would love to work with you on this. So I'm moving it over to Brittany now. Brittany, are you there? Brittany?
I think she's frozen. Oh, no, there she is.
Here.
There you are.
Oh, okay. So the next question, well, it's the last question, right, Fairly?
I think it has to be. We're at 7:45. We could go on
Okay.
all night.
No, we don't want it to go on all night.
I know. Y'all have already been subject to that so many times.
Did everybody ask the last question?
Okay, so the last question is, what will you do to handle drainage issues caused by under maintenance drainage systems in District 10?
Yeah, this is a really important question. This is like the most council-y type of question. Not the sexiest one, but it's probably the one that comes up the most. I was canvassing in Northdale not that long ago, and I met a Miss Wanda who told me that she herself, and I think she's like 65 years old, she has to go out there and physically clean out the drains because she gets no responsiveness from her councilwoman, and DPW isn't doing its job. And this is broadly across the board. This is one of the few things that seems to happen indiscriminately, is that DPW is not maintaining our drains in an adequate fashion. So one of the things that I do is, first of all, I'd stay on DPW. I mean, I'm going to be the loudest voice challenging DPW about why we're not more prepared before storms, and why they seem to be rushing 24 hours before storms to clean out our drains. But secondly, I'm going to use the power of the council to investigate DPW when we have floods. I'm going to be a nuisance to DPW because they need to be more responsive. If they need more funds, then we need to address that in the budget. But there's no excuse for your city parish not doing its basic blocking and tackling responsibilities, and I think that's one of them.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Collins.
So, and I'm going to go back to your last question for a second, right? And the reason why I'm walking back is basically, what do we do when the city parish is the cause of blight, right? When it's our fault that blight is happening. Right now in South Baton Rouge, there's a house that is falling down because of a broken drainage system, and the water's washing under that house, and that house is slowly sinking. If nothing's done about that, in the next 10 years, that property is blight. So what do we do when we're the cause of blight, right? What do we do when it's not the homeowner's fault that their house is sinking, and their house may fall down because the water is washing on their house, and she's calling the city week after week, and they're telling her that is impossible. Like, what do you do about that situation? I hate to bring that up, but when we talk about blight and drainage, sometimes the two go hand in hand. I think we have to address the structures of this district and do it holistically. Look at it all as one and the same. And drainage is atrocious in this district, and that's something we got to do better.
I'm trying desperately to share a picture of a couple of our friends in Beauregard Town just from June, and it's not letting me do it, but where the water is, their steps up to their homes is, 4 steps, and the water is up to their top step. And these are not named storms. These are just rain events. So we hear a lot about these rain events outside of, our city center, but they are so real within our city center and within District 10. So thank you, Eugene. Okay, moving on to Ms. Cozy.
So thank you for mentioning the drainage system and the problems that the residents are experiencing. So many people have this problem. We know that our infrastructure is old. That's what we're here having conversations about, is preserving the history of the community. And some of these communities are over 100 years old. And even though we have had changes to the drainage systems and updates, I don't think it's been sufficient. And I don't think that they've been completed. I think that we're still in the process of updating some of our drainage systems in our area. And so I think that's very important that we continue those plans if we have plans. I know in my house, in my neighborhood, they're working under the sewer and trying to work with the infrastructure underneath the city. and we need money in order to change these things. And it's not going to just happen because we wish it was going to happen, because we designate money from the budget and we prioritize it through policy in our city.
I personally think it's a huge issue and it doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I think that we need to come together. The people who engineer, all the engineers and environmentalists who they asked questions to before they started working. I honestly believe we just need to come together to see what they think the issue is, and then bring some other engineers in and pretty much re-engineer our streets that are likely to flood. It's an engineering issue, point blank period. It's not being engineered correctly because there's other countries that have absolute flooding issues. I mean, they are below the sea level and they don't flood like this. So I just think it's an engineering issue that we need to take a technical look at and fix it from there.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Gode.
So I think drainage just has to be a priority. I think I'm gonna be looking to analyze and execute the stormwater master plan to make sure to first find out even if the plan is effective or if it needs to be worked out, and then get a timeline for execution. And when we look at DPW, currently DPW is not going to accomplish much. And this is a different conversation, but I'm gonna shift to this point. When we are not competitive, our city parish departments are not competitive enough to employ people, to retain staff, to have a full working staff. Then this is what we have. We have departments that can't respond to issues. So right now, because our current wages and we're not competitive to private sectors and to other markets in other cities, we have young professionals that would rather work at Amazon than go work for DPW. They can actually make more, and it's less labor intensive. So that's what we have to look at.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Devontae Lewis.
I think this is an important topic, and I think we have to actually look broader when we talk about drainage. I think one of the challenges is that we know cities are dependent upon gravity drainage as its only system of water flow. We know these systems are old and they have been proven to be outdated. So it's not just solely about fixing the drains, it's about fixing the system of water management. I think that's one of the issues with the stormwater master plan that we're going to have to address. It truly only addressed drainage, it didn't address water flow, which is going to exacerbate the drainage problem. So fixing drains aren't going to solve until we actually deal with the economic system. So what do? I think some of the best practices that we've seen across the country, for instance, in Kansas City, adopting green spaces, using green and natural resources as a way of water management, reduces the reliance on the drain system, which reduces the problems that we see when they deteriorate. I think what we should do is we should incentivize and have an incentive program from homeowners to adopt some of these water management systems that can be placed into their house. I think cities have done that very well, giving a property tax if you install those, so it releases the importance kind of on your drainage systems.
Okay,
I think
Devontae, Mr. Lewis, thank you so much. I think we're
sorry,
out of time. No, that's okay. I'm begging Brittany in a text to ask you all one more question. Can I? One more?
Yeah, let's take it to 8.
She's telling me okay. Okay. I mean, I don't know if she really believes it. I'd have to see her face, and she's not showing it. But okay, so this is an important thing for us. Our mission is also cultural preservation. So a lot of the work that we do is to make sure that the full culture and the full narrative is told, and that that's supported in the best way that we can. I am working with a local African American museum as a board member to relocate from their current location to a city building with the support of the mayor, president. Obviously, this will have to go through Metro Council. But what I've seen in my years of working in cultural aspects of our community is that the city parish funding for arts and culture has been predominantly for those institutions that are not diverse and not equitable. They are traditional entities like the symphony, the opera, the ballet, the General Arts Council, things like that, LASM, to a point of where 90% of the city's funding actually funds only 3 entities at this point. A lot of this funding has not changed since the Pat Screen administration.
Yeah.
And we've been told that, you know, the city council has nothing to do with the city parish budget to, you know, look at these dollars and reallocate these funds. I don't think that that's the case. There was a budget meeting and only one Metro Council member attended that budget meeting. How would you work with the mayor and the rest of the Metro Council to make sure that our cultural funding and our dollars to support and represent all of the amazing things happening in this parish were funded and represented? Mr.
Well,
Anderson.
I think first off, I think you attend the budget meetings. I feel like the bar is, I mean, guys, the bar is really, really low. And I will obviously, just for Jay's edification, remind everybody that the current council person has endorsed Jay. So if you like the last 12 years, you'll love the next 4. I think that's the first thing, is actually doing your job, showing up at the meetings. Anybody that told you that the council people don't have anything to do with the budget or budget line items, they lied to you. And I hope that it was not the current council person, but again, like the last 12 years, you'll love the next 4. So I think first off, it's attending the meetings, actually making sure that you are being an advocate for the things that you value. I am a product of the arts community. I was part of the first teen youth poetry slam team that competed nationally. That was through a program called City at Peace. And that program specifically targeted young people.
City at Peace.
Yeah, I mean, we made a lot of like melodramatic plays, but it gave us a voice.
That's where I think that's
Probably.
where I remember you from. Yeah, okay.
Probably. Yeah. I used to be the poetry guy. Now I'm the guy with the weird hair.
All right, now it makes sense. Okay.
But you know, those are value addeds in our community, and you have to have a champion on the council who understands that, shows up at the budget meeting, and bangs the table for that money, not just going to the Arts Council, not just going to the big 3, but actually going to a diverse set of program providers that are targeting these communities.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, moving on to Mr. Collins.
Can you run the question back one more time for me?
You know, it kind of came off the cuff, Eugene. So I'm gonna try to recap it, but it's basically for many years the budget has been just rubber stamped by Metro Council, where all of our larger, less diverse, less equitable nonprofit cultural institutions have been funded, while we've continuously lost our diverse cultural nonprofits because there's no funding coming from the city, when they continue to fund at 90% for 3 organizations over at least the past 10 years.
So, you know, I think this is a simple response. We and Quinn mentioned a lot of this, but it's showing up and not rubber stamping the budget, right? Making sure that you're actively engaged, monitoring not only what the budget is, but the entities that we're funding, making sure that those entities are producing results at that's equitable, and not only equity, but making sure that the outputs equal the inputs, making sure that the money that we're putting into that system is equaling the results that we're getting out of it. And I'll tell you, man, Quinn was fired up tonight. I love the sport of politics guy here talking. Jay, he got you tonight. Devontae supporters tearing me up on Facebook right now. So, hey, man, this is fun. Love y'all, man. We got 6 more days to go. And I can imagine it's probably going to get hotter before by Monday. Monday, some of y'all might be in the street fight. But I will be there to break you up. I'm 5'1".
Don't underestimate me. I will come after y'all and I will break this up.
And Devontae, you tell that Matt I'm looking for him. Matt Atkinson, I'm looking for you.
Okay, let's keep going because we need to hear from the rest real quick. We are so over time, and I'm sorry, that's my fault. So we have not even heard from Ms. Cozy yet. So Unmute yourself, please, Miss Cozy.
All right, so I'm enjoying listening to you guys laugh and have a good time because it reminds me of home. District 10, you know, we enjoy ourselves, we have a good time, but we're serious and we mean business. And so when you talk about preserving our culture, we do need to look at the budget that's allotted to our district. And each community center also has funding that's available to them. And so perhaps we need to build relationships and make sure that they're sustainable relationships so that some of the money can be allocated towards achieving some of your goals. If the 3 larger nonprofit organizations are receiving all the money, then let's befriend them. Let's see what we can do to incorporate some of their recreational and cultural activities over in our community. We like dance too. We like tap dance. We like ballet. We like roller skating. Put us into the know as far as some of these art and cultural activities are concerned. And we do have new art center that's being constructed downtown. And so that's in District 10. And so there are a lot of cultural aspects of District 10. We just need to make sure that we're tapping into them and that we can be a partner at the table along with your organization.
Thank you, Ms. Cozy. Okay, Ms. Cottingham.
I think it's just being that voice for change, going to the budget meetings, making sure you know, knowing the budget, and then just being that voice for change. We have to change what we're doing because the old way isn't working. So if 90% of the budget is going to 3 different places, that just needs to stop happening, and we need to make sure we're allocating it to different places. And I think it's just that simple. The fact that our government's still so stuck on old money and old heads, the way they run things, it's sad, and it needs to change. We need to be a bit more progressive, and we need to think outside of the box. It's really that simple.
Thank you, Ms. Cottingham. Okay, Mr. Gode.
Yeah, so besides my work with the youth, last year I spent a year teaching business and leadership skills to 11th graders. And part of that time I found myself teaching them history because our current youth in the school system, they are not learning history. And so this museum, these partnerships are key for our community. And I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier. The representative of District 10, or any representative in this city, has to become an advocate, and they have to have relationships. They have to be able to be diverse, and they have to be able to be diplomatic, and they have to be able to have a voice to bring investment into the city. And that means cultural, that means historic, that means home ownership, that means all of those things. But if you can't talk and you can't bridge those relationships and bring those things in, again, many people are not breaking down the doors to come to Baton Rouge at this moment, but they can be. But we have to be out there and build the investment and make people come here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gode. All right, Mr. Lewis.
Well, yes, I'm going to echo kind of what we already heard. You got to show up. I mean, I think you can count on Devontae Lewis to be at a budget meeting since I voluntarily work at a place called the Budget Project. So I will definitely be at anything budget. But I also think it's about accountability. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do when you're talking about budgetary processes is you have to ask the questions and have equity. And I think that's one of the tenets that I've talked about. One of the first initiatives I want to do is a racial and gender equity assessment, not only of just our procedures and processes, but where we fund in our costs, because that's going to showcase where our dollars are going, who's benefiting from, and how with actual going to different populations, because we know no policy is race neutral, and the most place that you see that is always in your budget. And so I'm a product of arts and culture. I mean, it may shock a lot of people. I was a shy kid until I did theater at the age of 7. And that's when I kind of got this talkative voice. So the importance that art and culture for students and for children and for people plays a role in community development. And so when we are talking about sustainability and historical preservation, that's also about developing the next generation of talent. I mean, that's giving them the connection and everything else.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Brittany to close us out, but I did want to read a really great comment that I think so many of us agree with. And, you know, we kind of joked about this in the beginning about what an awesome group of candidates you all are. But this was from Aaron Banks, and he said, I think you guys really should work together after this election. If I think if you all put your heads together, change will benefit the whole district I've lived in my whole life. And I think that we can see that from this evening, and knowing each of you, it's just so wonderful to know that District 10 has these amazing number of candidates to choose from. So with that, Brittany, take it away, my friend.
With that, I would like to thank all of you guys for participating, even though we had to set it back by a week. We appreciate everyone attending. We appreciate you guys staying on a little longer to get these last few questions answered.